Did Christianity begin in Ethiopia? Most people think they already know the answer to this question. Christianity came from somewhere in the Middle East, then spread outward. Case closed. But what if the real story isn't that simple? What if one of the most overlooked regions in ancient history was connected to Christianity from the very beginning in ways that most people never even hear about? Because there's one country that keeps appearing in the background of early biblical history. Not Rome, not Greece, not Europe, but Ethiopia. And once you start connecting the dots, the story gets even harder to ignore. Long before modern borders existed, ancient writers used different names for lands south of Egypt. One of the most common was Cush, a region frequently mentioned in biblical texts. In Greek translation, this area is often referred to as Ethiopia. That word shows up repeatedly across ancient writings, which raises a question. Why does this region appear so often in the world surrounding early biblical history? Was it just a distant neighbor or something more connected? One of the earliest and most important stories in the New Testament describes a high-ranking official traveling from Jerusalem. He is described as an Ethiopian court official serving a powerful queen-like figure known as Kandake. After worshiping in Jerusalem, he is returning home when he encounters Philip the evangelist. Philip explains the scriptures to him, and then he is baptized on the spot. No fanfare, no long journey, just a quiet moment that becomes one of the earliest recorded African conversions in Christian history. But here's the mystery. The text never tells us what happens after he returns home. No follow-up, no explanation, just silence. In Ethiopian tradition, that silence is not empty. It's meaningful. Because Ethiopian Christian memory holds that this official helped introduce the faith back home shortly after his return. That belief isn't confirmed in historical records, but it has been preserved for centuries within Ethiopian Christianity, and it becomes one of the earliest threads connecting Africa to the Christian story. Then, there is one of the most famous figures in ancient tradition, the Queen of Sheba. The biblical account describes her visiting King Solomon after hearing of his wisdom, but it never clearly states where she came from. That detail has been debated for centuries. Some traditions place Sheba in Arabia. Others connect her to East Africa. But Ethiopian tradition takes it further. According to the Kibra Nagast, the queen, known as Makeda, was from Ethiopia. And her story doesn't end in Jerusalem. It continues in Africa, where her son, Menelik I, is said to have carried sacred traditions back to Ethiopia, including, according to belief, the Ark of the Covenant. There is no archaeological confirmation of this, but the story has shaped Ethiopian identity for over 1,000 years and still raises questions about how deeply intertwined this region was with early sacred history. By the 4th century CE, something major changes in the region, historically known as Axum. A ruler named King Izana adopts a new faith, Christianity, making his kingdom one of the earliest states in the world to do so. This shift is closely associated with a figure named Frumentius, who is credited with introducing Christian teachings and helping establish the early church structure there in the region, in Axum. Inscriptions and coins from the era confirm this transition. From that point on, Christianity becomes deeply rooted in the region. And it doesn't disappear. It continues for centuries. One of the most unusual things about Ethiopian Christianity is its scripture tradition. The Ethiopian Bible contains more books than most Western Bibles. Among them are texts like the Book of Enoch, the Jubilees. These writings were widely known in ancient Jewish and early Christian worlds. but were later excluded from most biblical canons elsewhere. Yet, in Ethiopia, they were preserved. And one of the most important discoveries in biblical scholarship is this: the complete version of the Book of Enoch survived primarily through Ethiopian manuscripts written in Ge'ez. Without them, large portions of this text would have likely been lost to history. Ethiopia is also the home to some of the oldest surviving Christian manuscripts in the world. Among them are the Garima Gospels, preserved at the Abba Garima Monastery. Radiocarbon dating places them between 4th to 7th century CE. If the earlier dates are correct, they would be among the oldest illustrated gospel books ever discovered anywhere in the world, created by monks in a remote highland monastery at the time when much of Europe was undergoing political collapse. So far, the story seems unusual. A region constantly appearing in ancient texts, an early African conversion recorded in scripture, a kingdom that adopts Christianity earlier than most of the world, a biblical canon that preserves lost texts, ancient manuscripts that survive when others disappear. At this point, it's fair to ask, why does Ethiopia appear so early and so deeply in the Christian story? And then comes the final piece, the part most people already assume, but rarely think through carefully. Despite all these connections, traditions, and early influences, historical evidence places the origin of Christianity in 1st century Judea, within the Roman-controlled region of the Eastern Mediterranean. From there, the movement spreads rapidly across different cultures and regions, including Africa, Asia, Europe. Ethiopia does not represent the birthplace of Christianity, but it does represent something just as significant. One of the earliest and most enduring Christian civilizations in the world, a place where the faith didn't just arrive, but became deeply rooted and preserved. So, did Christianity begin in Ethiopia? Historically, no. But if you only focus on where it began, you miss something bigger. Because Ethiopia's story isn't just about origin. It's about continuity and preservation and mystery. And maybe that's why the question refuses to disappear. Because once you trace Christianity's earliest echoes through Africa, you realize that the story is much larger than most people were taught.